What I'd like to talk about is restoring a nation. And when you look at that first slide, this presentation is going to be more me asking you questions and you deciding where you're at. But the real question that we face today is, what are you willing to do and what are you willing to change? Is what you're doing today working? I hear in the news media constantly that we're not at war with Islam. Has anybody heard that? Yes. Are we not at war with Islam? Come on now, be brave out there.
Yes.
We are or we aren't?
I believe we are not.
We're not.
But are they at war with us?
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that question. Could you do the next slide?
Who's we?
Islam is a peaceful religion, right? How many millions of Muslims are there in the world?
1.2 billion.
Okay, so out of that, they say that there's only 10% of them that are radicalized, correct?
It's like 0.1%. I don't know what radicalized. We're radicalized.
Well, we are radicalized. We need to become radicalized. But the point is this is what we hear on the top from our government and the government-controlled media, I should call it that.
People believe these have been doctored photographs. They're hoaxes.
They're not doctored, okay? I mean, these ones I pulled off the internet, I mean, they might be doctored, but what you're seeing here is I spent a little bit of time in the Middle East, and I have a different opinion of what Islam is and what Islam isn't. But when we talk about Islam, are we talking only about a religion? We're not. We're talking about a political move. We're talking about a culture. We're talking about government and everything that slides from that. Every aspect of a nation that's run by Islam is run by Islam. It would be like in the United States if Christianity determined everything we did as a government, everything we did as a taxation, judicial system, on and on and on. Well, Christianity in the United States is a religion, but it's not a political move. It's not the government. Next slide, please.
The opposite.
We know that the Muslims that come to the United States just want a better life, right? But they protest, and we see these signs. I mean, they just come here for a better life, true? 72% of the legal and illegal immigrants in the United States are on what? Government welfare, right? So they're coming here for a better life. Are they coming to assimilate and become Americans? Are they accepting our culture, our language, our laws, or our government? Okay, and I should start out and say that this is not a speech against Islam, but this will all make sense in a while. Next slide, please. Is Sharia law compatible with American culture and American law? I mean, are we for honor killings, child bribes, women and children being treated as chattel, and the fact that they're completely intolerant with any other religion? Sharia law says if you're not a good enough Muslim, we're going to behead you, let alone if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or Buddhist or on and on. We hear much to do in our government about the war on women, correct? Is there a bigger war on women than Sharia law?
Orthodox Judaism.
Next slide, please. So are you silent or are you intolerant? Now we're moving into the political correctness side of this. Are you silent about what Sharia law and 250,000 Syrian refugees will do to our country? Or do you speak up and are you intolerant? All right, next slide, please. The narrative is being shaped by the media and the government, true or not? Right? The battlefield is being shaped by two enemies. One is radical Islam, and one is our government. Is denial of the fact that Islam is at war with us, is that a strategy that's going to lead to success? No. I mean, this is the point. Through information operations, psychological ops, they're shaping. I talk to people that say, what's wrong with you, Christian, bigot, Islamophobe, that you don't want to bring in 250,000 Syrian refugees that it's impossible to vet. The government might tell you they're doing a good job of vetting. I'm telling you that I worked in the government for 30 years, and we have a hard time often vetting our own people that have lived in the United States their whole life. We're not going to go to Assad and say, is, Muhammad a good man, and get a correct answer since we're trying to take out Assad. And those countries don't have the registries and the government and the ability to track who's radical and who's not. Next slide, please. So, what we've come to is that the media and the government is trying to shape us to believe that, that we're not at war with Islam, Islam's not at war with us, and Islam's a peaceful religion. And many Americans believe that to be true. They believe that exactly what comes out of the media and exactly what comes out of the government. So we never stand up to defend ourselves as a nation from a foreign threat. My question for you is, are we at war for our survival in our nation? I mean, this would indicate, now it's about $19 trillion debt, 54 million abortions. We have over 304,500 criminal laws and regulations in the U.S. Federal Code. Every U.S. citizen commits about 3 felonies a day. The government collects your phone calls, emails, texts, which is a violation of your Fourth Amendment to be secure in your person, papers, places, correct? Well, since they're collecting it, they're also violating your Fifth Amendment, the right to remain silent. And many Americans run around out there and they say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't care if they collect my data. Well, Dan Happel might not be doing anything wrong that he knows of, but there's 304,500 criminal laws and regulations. When they say Dan Happel's a bad guy, does Dan Happel have the resources to fight the federal government?
No.
But that's the same thing that's happening to all of you. There were reasons that our founders put these in place. There were reasons that the federal government had 18 powers and all the rest was left, according to the 10th Amendment, to the states and to the people. The first 10 amendments were negative, right? It said the government shall not, 9 of the first 10. And we, not realizing that we're at war, we've let our elected representatives take those rights away from us. Next slide, please. This is a price we pay for silence. We can be intolerant or we can be silent. The price of silence is everything that we have. Next slide, please. I will say that we contend, but we're not in the fight. In the military, we have a thing called 0 hours when we attack the battle, or when we start the war. And my question is, when did 0 hour start in the United States? Now, we're not talking about Islam, we're talking about the United States. That was just, I kind of laid that out to show you that there's an information campaign going on telling you how you should think about Islam. And then you have to determine whether it's true or not, and then you have to determine whether you're going to stand up or you're going to accept it. And that was just kind of, it didn't come off the way I wanted it to, but I was trying to show you that there are forces out there trying to shape how you think and how you react. But the real question is, are we in a war for the survival of our nation, our culture?
July 4, 1776.
So in your mind, when did 0 hour start? You know, when I'm thinking in the military, you know, when we do a war and we have a campaign, right? We have objectives, and I think that you know, there were specific objectives that we as a nation can point to. When 1913, when we started the income tax, when we started the Federal Reserve, you know, when I'm just throwing things out there. 1954, when the Johnson Amendment that made speaking politics out of the pulpit, you know, a violation. We can go on and on and on. But there have been gradual objectives that peeled away the legacy that we were left by the founders. But we never realized we were in war. They took from us and we did nothing. At best, we've been contending with ineffective delaying actions. Has the decline of our country sped up or slowed down? I mean, the way I see it, it's just cranking up faster and faster and faster. And what are we doing to stop that drive of the enemy, whoever you identify as the enemy in your mind? What are we doing to stop that? What are we using? What tools are we using? We're using the same tools. We're being forced into the battlefield that they've chosen. We're using political parties. We're using campaigns. We're dividing our nation further down the political party lines. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. We have our ineffective delaying. I might step on some toes here, but the point is there are people with very good intentions, the best concerns for our nation in their heart, that have worked extremely hard to change the direction that we're going in. But they're always deciding how we fight the war. If I go to war someplace, I'm not going to let the enemy determine, you know, where I attack, where I fight, and how I fight. But that's what we're doing in this nation, and we're doing it through the news. We're being inundated daily in the news media. I mean, how many people think that the nation's over in here, that we're done? I've got one hand. You know, I can stand up in front of a crowd, and most of the time everybody says we're done. We're just going to hold on till the end. But they've been taught that. They've been taught that daily in the newspaper. We're taught that we don't control our government. Our representatives don't work for us. And then guess what? We line up the next election and we elect the same immoral, unethical cowards to office that we did the last time, because they had our moniker. They had a D or an R behind their name. That's our guy. If I stand up here and say Hillary Clinton is a liar, she's a proven, you know, I mean, is somebody going to disagree with me? I mean, the Democrats don't even disagree, right? But on the other side of the line, you'll see the Republicans elect their guy that said, I'm going to stop executive level amnesty, I'm going to stop Obamacare, I'm going to stop abortion, I'm going to stop, and I'll go on down the line. They go to office, they're elected to office, and they have this thing called the continuing resolution, so they don't have to line item vote on things on a budget. And they pass it, and then they send you an email and say, oh, we did a great thing. We kept the government funded. We can't let the government go unfunded. Well, I get my check from the government. I'm saying defund it. They say Planned Parenthood videos come out, and they show the dismemberment of babies and the selling of body parts, and you're paying $528 million a year to continue that Holocaust. In my military career, you have spent trillions of dollars to go over to countries to protect the defenseless. Well, we're over there protecting the defenseless. In our country, we're spending hundreds of millions, we're spending billions of dollars to kill the defenseless. And our elected officials say, no, we're not going to shut the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. Well, the Declaration of Independence says there's 3 reasons we have government. For this reason, we institute governments among men to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or life, liberty, and property. So they with that vote, they have voided any ability they have for any moral or ethical reason to shut down the government, because they won't do it for life, they're not going to do it for your liberty, and they're not going to do it for your private property. True or not? You know, there's an old saying that says the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We've had lots of good people, lots of good intentions, lots of resources that have gone towards fixing this nation. And we haven't. I say the road to hell is paved with compromise. If you look up compromise if you look up compromise in the dictionary, it says the destruction of someone or something. But if you turn on the TV or listen to the radio, what's the word that's being shouted the loudest? Compromise. The Democrats have to compromise with the Republicans. Well, whenever they compromise, somebody loses, and it's usually us, the citizens. They're compromising to stay in office, but they're compromising everything that you've been given. So what's the strategic end state of the enemy? Whoever you define as the enemy. We know that the country's being destroyed, so somebody's taking it. We're at war. What's their strategic end state?
Chaos.
Say that?
Chaos and in one world government.
Anybody else?
Depopulation.
You guys talk really loud. Control.
Absolute control.
Do you think they want the United States to survive in the global community as a beacon of freedom? No. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the pivotal question. If what you're doing is not working, then is it time to try something else? Do we have time to try something else? I believe we do. So, we're going to talk a little bit about strategic planning. The reason why good organizations have failed to even slow down the decline of our nation is because they have plans. They have tactical plans that they put into place, and they win tactical battles. Since World War II, the U.S. military has gone to war all over the world. We haven't lost any tactical battles. But can somebody tell me what war we won? My point is we need to identify who the enemy is. I have my own thoughts. What I'm trying to do is make you leave here and think about how are we going to do things different. What's the most powerful weapon that's being waged in the United States today?
Information.
That's media, information, those are tools. Anybody else? I mean, they're good answers, but those are tools.
Control the money.
What's that?
Money.
Control the money.
Money. That's another tool. I'll tell you what the most powerful, I'll tell you what the most powerful weapon that's being waged in our nation is. Ignorance. Ignorance allows all of this to take place. John Jay, the first Supreme Court Justice of the United States, said it's the responsibility of every citizen to read and study the Constitution, to pass on freedom to the rising generations. For when a man understands his rights, he will sooner perceive when they're being violated and do something about it. For years, I didn't understand. I didn't see any rights being taken away from me. I marched on. I did what I thought I was doing for God and country. You know, and one day I woke up and I realized they were all being taken away. But it was based on my ignorance of the rule of law. And I will contend that what the enemy wants to do is take away the one piece of paper, the one document that we still have that protects us as citizens. And that's the Constitution. If they can destroy the Constitution, there is nothing left in this nation. And I won't argue, and I'm sure, you know, our Constitution has been severely trampled on, but it's not gone. So you guys named most of the tools that I would have put up there, where they use news media, they use money, they use, you know, power, influence, everything. And this is about control. Because the enemy wants to control. Who controls the narrative of what goes on in our nation? The news media and the government would kind of make you think they're the same thing, wouldn't it? Who controls the battle space that's being fought for our nation? Next slide, please. I hear this all the time. Washington, D.C. is broken, but I ask people, I say, well, what's Washington, D.C.? Or who is Washington, D.C.?
District of Criminals.
But what is it? I mean, if you're identifying that as broken, what are you identifying that's broken? It's the political system that's broken, right? Who or what executes power in the political system in Washington, D.C.? There's two private organizations that control the United States. Or I shouldn't say, that exercise control of the population. How's that? And that's the Democrat and the Republican Party. We no longer have a representative government. We elect somebody that either has good intentions or they lie to us about what they're going to do. They go to Washington, D.C., and they line up behind their party. But I'll take it a step further. The parties have reached singularity. They're one and the same. At the top of the Democrat and Republican Party, it's one organization. And we were warned about all this. George Washington, in his farewell address to Congress, said a wise people will discourage and restrain the spirit of party. And he talked about how it would allow for foreign influence. It would pit one section of the country against the other. It would cause riot and insurrection. He also said that the spirit of party would allow cunning, ambitious, unprincipled men to subvert the power of the people and usurp for themselves the reins of government, and then destroy the very mechanisms that brought them to their unjust dominion. 220 years ago he said that. He also said the two pillars of our country were what? Religion and morality. And how dare any man call himself a patriot that would undermine those two pillars of our society? So, would you agree we don't have a representative government?
Yeah.
So, I spent a few years of my life hunting down insurgent organizations. And the government doesn't want to go out there and kill and capture all those guys. We just want to take away their power to operate. So if you have two organizations, private organizations, that have become one, that are taking away or destroying your constitution, your rights, and your livelihood and your future, why do you support them? I will put forth that your vote doesn't count. You're voting for parties that are destroying our nation. And I might step on some toes because I know a lot of good people that have worked within parties to try and change them. There is so much power behind these parties, you're never going to change them. You're going to get slight tactical victories, but you're not going to change you're not going to knock them off their plan. And if we're going to be the sovereign of our nation, then we have to fight a different fight. Because the fight you're in is the one that they've designed. The frustration you feel is the one that they've given you. The occasional victories that you've seen are the ones that they've afforded to you, to keep you as loyal followers. Next slide, please. Too often we focus on things that are important, but they're not critical. Again, we win tactical battles, but we lose the war. Because we waste our resources, our finances, our people on good projects, but not critical projects. We continue to allow the enemy to determine the battle space, and we will compromise to have our guy in office. We won't hold our guy accountable because we don't want the other guy to win. Correct? I mean, we forgive everything. There's no accountability or responsibility in the federal election process, and I will contend in the state election process. If you continue to do things the way you're doing them today, I guarantee that our nation's doomed. There's no recovery unless we start doing things different. Next slide, please. Story time. A.C. Whitmire, Major, U.S. Army, wrote the victory plan for World War II. One guy. He started with a strategic end state. You know what it said? It said the unconditional surrender of Germany and Japan. At the time our Navy had been decimated in Pearl Harbor, we had 186,000 men and women in uniform. Our population was about 150 million. We were largely an agricultural nation with some manufacturing. 4 years later, we'd put 16.5 million people in uniform. We'd build almost every piece of armament and munitions for the Allied forces. And we had the unconditional surrender of Germany and Japan. In 1941, the American people had no desire to fight war on the foreign shores. We had no ability to project power. My point is that we had a nation that was mobilized for a single cause in which the people believed it was the survival of the nation. And this one gentleman wrote a strategic plan. Now, throughout the years, there were a lot of good ideas that came in. But the victory came about because of a focused nation, focused resources, and focused people on a focused plan. If you have plans all over the map that are not focused on a strategic end state, you're always going to be lost. Next slide, please. So my question is, if you want to change the nation, what's your strategic end state? What is it? Restore a constitutional government? Or restore our guys or their guys? I don't know. This is something that I throw it out there for you to think about. A strategic plan, you need to focus on the critical and not worry about the important. You need to focus all your resources on the strategic end state. You need to plan your battle in phases. It's a little bit like eating an elephant one bite at a time, but if you look at what's happened to our nation, this didn't happen overnight. This has been a process, at least 100 years old. And some of you will contend, since the ink was dry on the Constitution. But if you don't have a strategic plan, you're not going to win, because you're always fighting their battle on their battle space at their time and place. And next slide, please. And I will contend that a defense is not a strategic plan. To keep it from falling off the cliff is not a strategic plan. We really have to be deliberate in our plans. We have to stand up as men and women of character. Personally, I could stand up here and preach a sermon that if we, don't return to God and we don't have a moral foundation and a firm compass, we're lost, period. But the enemy has weeded God out of the equation. Kicked him out of the public square. But if we have a cornerstone, something that keeps us on track for truth and justice, we can only get that from one source, an unchanging source, which is God. But then we have to plan accordingly. We got to stop being in the defensive, and we got to stop compromising, and we have to stop letting the enemy determine how we're going to fight. There's enough brain power in this room to write a wonderful strategic plan to take back our nation. You might fight a little bit, but in the end you'll come out with a wonderful plan that would restore our nation. Because I'm going to tell you, if you keep on the same track, how long do we have? Anybody want to guess?
Maybe 2 years.
Maybe. Absolutely. I think back of 54 men that swore their lives, their fortunes, and sacred honor to each other, not to the nation, to each other. I think about, depending on what source, 3 to 5% of the people that fought in the Revolutionary War. 20% were still loyalists to Great Britain. And those people defeated the most powerful army and navy the world had ever seen. And I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about picking up one weapon, one bullet. I'm not talking about that kind of war. I'm talking about the cultural war. I'm talking about the war of truth. I'm talking about taking it back in the political battlefield. I've had plenty of people come up to me and they'll lean on me and they'll go, hey Bill, I got 50,000 rounds of 5.56 and blah, blah, blah. And I go, really, what are you going to do with that? Well, it's going down, and we're going to take it back. And I say, well, you ever been shot at? No. You ever been mortared or rocketed? No. I said, well, I have, and I think we need to save it before it gets to that. And that's my challenge to you. If it's worth saving, let's do something different. Thanks.